How's it, guys? Welcome back. Now, this chapter is chapter chapter 18. Yeah, and it's about a chap called Sweetman. And as I said yesterday, I was just talking to a friend of mine. That, we haven't chatted for a long time, but he saw that I was posting these, and he got in contact with me. And it's like we were friends like years and years ago. We were friends for a long time. And he actually said that he is the great grandson of this Sweetman that is talked about in the book, that's mad. I never knew that. It's insane. Anyway, it's going to be quite interesting. Right, kettle's boiled. Today I'm having some rooibos tea, which is South African kind of like bush herbal tea. I was just grown up drinking it. It remains red bush tea because it makes like this reddish tea. Naturally caffeine free, which is probably what I need because I'm recording these, especially this one. I'm recording it a bit late, quite close to my bedtime, and don't want to be kept up. Got early rise tomorrow. Got to get my fitness back on track because I slacked over the Christmas period. Now the rugby season is starting again, and I am very, very unfit. I've put on some good muscle weight though, which is good. Yeah, I just need to get my fitness and my speed back up to match my muscle weight. Otherwise, I'm going to be plodding along very slowly out there on the field. Yeah. So, rooibos, you don't need to steep it for so long, like Earl Grey. Bit of milk and sugar. Lovely. Cheers. Alright. Sweetman, the myth. Judy had been taken to Central Hospital. When I went to visit her, I made sure I had a dozen of her favorite yellow roses. All the ladies oohed and ahed, and I made the right noises too. I whispered to Judy, "What are you in here for?" "Women problems." "Ah, you want to hear about it?" She was enjoying this. No. "You ever been in hospital?" she asked out loud so the rest of the ladies could hear. "Yes, I was in a car accident once, and they had to do a skin graft on my foot. When I woke up from the operation, they told me I had to be on complete bed rest. Use only the urinal and bedpan. No way. I would hop to the toilet whenever there was no one around. An older nurse would come every 2 hours to see if I'd used the urinal. I told her that I was saving it and only going to go when they let me get up. She was quite impressed, but came and gave me some orange pills to help me pass the urine. By this time, every lady in the ward was listening to my story, and Judy's eyes were sparkling with anticipation. The nurse asked why I didn't want to use the urinal. I told her I was afraid I would get sick using something someone else had used before, so she brought me a brand new one, still in the cellophane packet. I ordered grapefruit juice with my lunch and poured it all into the urinal. When the nurse came in, she saw right away that I had used the urinal. Seemed quite pleased too. So I took it and held it up for her to examine and said, "Looks kind of cloudy, doesn't it? Well, better run it through again." Whereupon I drank it all down in one breath. The poor old nurse ran from the room screaming, "He's gone crazy! He's gone crazy!" I never saw her again. The ladies were all hooting with laughter. Encouraged by my success, I continued, The hospital replaced the old nurse with Louise, a very pretty, mischievous nurse who had just graduated. She fully approved of my stunt, and the two of us planned another one to pull on the group of nursing students who were starting the next day. We took a bedpan and put peanut butter in it. This was tucked under my sheets, and when the young innocents came in, Louise took out the pan and exclaimed, "This looks just like peanut butter." This had their full attention. She took a couple of sniffs and said, "This even smells like peanut butter. I wonder what it tastes like." Whereupon she scooped a bit up with her finger and popped it into her mouth. 3 of the nursing students fainted on the spot, and the rest fled, not even to take the time to drag their fallen companions away. That is cruel. That is too cruel. Judy was holding her stomach. The tears were rolling down her face. Between gasps, she begged me to leave. So I bade farewell to all the ladies and went home to pack. The story of Sweetman had intrigued me for years. He had disgraced himself by contracting syphilis from one of his African girlfriends. Being from one of the upper-crust English families, the family had tried to send him back to England. But he had other ideas, and with his 4-bore caliber elephant guns, he had travelled by ox wagon up into the Zambezi Valley to the Siabuya district. He found himself a cave in the foothills of Tundazi Mountain, the biggest mountain in the Zambezi Valley. This was ideal because it had water. There were plenty of elephants to hunt, which was his other passion, the first being ladies. This all happened in the 1930s. He hired 4 hunters from among the Batonka and taught them how to use the guns, and they would go hunting every day, bringing the ivory back to the cave. Twice a year he would hire up to 100 porters who would take the ivory to Kwekwe and sell the ivory. A pound of gold for a pound of ivory. A pound for a pound of ivory. This was paid in gold sovereigns, which he kept in 10-gallon sadza pots on both sides of the wagon box. He was given the nickname Watila by the Batonka, which meant to pour, because whenever someone came to visit his cave, he would pour tea from a large teapot he owned. His best friend was the local witch doctor. From talking to the locals, they shared a lot of similar interests, the main one being sitting and doing nothing. Watila had made the witch doctor promise that when he died, they were to seal the cave he was living in, and never let a white man know about it. Watila did die, and he was buried in the floor of the cave. The 4 guns were placed in the teepee shape over the ashes of the fire where he cooked. Mopani trees were cut and put across the entrance to the cave. Rocks were piled against the trees, and this was all covered with soil to allow the grass to grow over the entrance. The cave was then protected by lion men. Even in caves today, I've seen Bushman paintings of these lion men. They wear the headdress made from a skinned head and mane of a lion. They sport a tail, but it's more like a horse's tail. They wear sandals with the footprints of a lion carved into the wooden soles. When they encounter a victim, they tear them apart with large metal claws. When the body is found, to all appearances, a lion killed him. A death like this is enough to keep anyone away from a place like Watila's cave. I had been planning this trip for a couple of years, as I had met a colored man, Kazma, who was considered a brother of this witch doctor. One of the men who had helped to bury Watila had told Kazma about the cave in detail. On a moonlit night, he had taken Kazma to the foot of the hill where the cave was, but in the end his fear got the better of him, and he just pointed and then ran. Kazma stayed with me for a while. He was a chain smoker and seemed to be ill. I suppose as a way to say thank you for being looked after, he told me the story of Sweetman. He seemed anxious to go, and afterwards I knew why. He only lived a few weeks after we returned, and he wanted to find this cave as much as I did, and knew his time was running out. In spite of the Rhodesian bush war being in full spate, Kazma and I drove to Tundazi Mountain and set up hang on. I need to have a few sips. My mouth is stumbling. In spite of the Rhodesian war being in full spate, Kazma and I drove to Tundazi and set up camp at the base of the mountain. Around the campfire that night, Kazma told me how when he had first arrived at this spot, he had some donkeys, and as there were many lions, he had made a thorn boma to protect the donkeys. During the afternoon, he had shot an eland. All afternoon, he had been rendering down the fat in a large cast iron pot in the middle of the thorn boma. During the night, a lion jumped right over the thorn fence, and the first step he took inside the boma, he stepped into the hot eland fat. With a roar, the lion jumped right back over the fence, with no more disturbances that night. We were camped right next to a Batonka village, and they assured Kazma, whom they knew well, that there had been no terrorists there for a long time. I had a few days and figured that one ought to be able to find the cave in that amount of time. I hired one of the locals to carry my water and extra ammunition, as I was always fully prepared for contact. This meant I was carrying my FN, my webbing, which carried 4 extra magazines of 20 rounds each, a pouch with 2 hand grenades, and then my backpack, which carried water and an extra 200 rounds of ammo. My helper and guide carried another pack with another 200 rounds of ammo, 4 Zulu rockets, flares, smoke grenades, and a couple of phosphorus grenades should the need arise. Besides that, he carried a water container, which had 10 liters of water. In that heat, one could easily drink that in one day. We left camp early and hiked the entire day, finishing the water by early afternoon. My guide opted to go back to camp, but I wanted to carry on, as I had a feeling that I was near something. My instincts were right, but not quite what I'd expected. It was a cave all right, but had obviously been used by terrorists for quite a while, leaving their Chinese fish tins and the odd AK lying about. I could see it hadn't been used for a couple of months, which made me feel a lot better. The view of the whole valley was amazing, but my thirst was killing me. I had 2 packs, and the heat had dehydrated me so badly that my tongue had swelled, not allowing me to close my mouth. I could never make it back to camp without some form of moisture. I took my binoculars and spotted a bull elephant a short way down the hill. I ran blindly after him, and then keeping downwind, followed him until I saw him throwing mud up onto his shoulder. I ran straight towards him, knowing that there must be water to make mud. He shook his head vigorously at me, but moved off. I found the sodden patch, and there was a pool of muddy water that had been wallowed in by countless buffalo, and it stank of elephant urine. It tasted so bad that I had to hold my nose when I was drinking, but I do believe that it saved my life. It was dark when I came into camp. Kazma had made some sadza, the stiff maize porridge that you eat with your hands, and we had this with a pot of spinach. It tasted wonderful. I've often sat in fancy restaurants and thought of that simple meal, and I always think of how much better that tasted than the duck l'orange or steak tartare that I'm battling with in front of me. The next day I went out again, and this time I took more water and less weapons. I searched for 4 days and had a lot of great experiences, but no cave. I wonder why he was searching for a cave when the myth clearly states that, the cave was covered up. So, I don't know. In the evenings, I would go with Kazma to the different villages. They all knew him, and we would all sit around and talk. After the small talk, I would ask, "Do you remember Kanyani?" "Ah, yes, the short one. He was our last native commissioner." They would smile and scratch at the memories. Do you remember Tapson? Yes, he was the first native commissioner. He wasn't. He wasn't really a commissioner, but everyone thought he was. He was the friend of the Rain Queen, and she gave him gold. That is why he left, so he could go and buy a farm in Marula with that same gold. The Rain Queen was probably the equivalent to a paramount chief, except she was a woman. Except she was a woman. I don't know why I said plural there. She had tremendous power, and you had to come to her with gifts, preferably gold, in order for her to bless you with rain. When the rains did not come, Mr. Tapson organized maize meal to be brought up by truck to the Batonka, and in this way, he kept them from starving, but also saving face for the Rain Queen. Hence the gift of a good chunk of gold. And what about the one before Tapson? Watilla, the one who liked the women so much, I carried on. Oh, yes. We all remember him. We had to watch our wives all the time with that one. He was a real rascal. There was chuckles and smiles all around. Do you know where he lived? I asked hopefully. Who lived? They would almost chorus. Watilla, the one I was just talking about. We don't even know who you are talking about. And they would get this faraway look in their eyes that said that this was the end of the conversation. This happened time after time, and I tried different approaches, but the answers were always the same, whenever I started to ask about the location of the cave. Kazmaz also chose this time to tell me that he remembered the witch doctor telling him that they had covered the entrance of the cave with mapani poles, then rocks, and finally soil so the grass would grow over it. Oh, okay, that's why. Because he didn't know prior that he wasn't looking for a cave, but I was supposed to somehow find it. Yeah, that was covered over. Okay. To assuage my disappointment at not finding the cave, I picked up a 10-foot mamba that had been run over. I coiled it beneath my sleeping bag and left it in my pickup. Arriving home late at night, I left everything as was and couldn't wait for the morning when my gardener Funnison would empty my belongings. I was awakened by a blood-curdling scream. Gogo, our maid, was unpacking instead of Funnison. My little joke had kind of backfired on me. Gogo was giving me hell. I found out that Funnison wasn't even there. After Gogo had settled down a bit, I told her Funnison must have put it there, and then left again during the night. This got me a small reprieve, but only after promises were made for plenty of game meat the next time I went into the bush. Alright, that's the end of the chapter for today. And actually, in his second book, Bill reveals that some of the details of Sweetman were actually not true. Some of the details that he had heard in the myth, But I guess you'll have to tune in for his second book, Trunk Calls, once we finish this one. Anyway, have a good night, sleep well, and I'll check you tomorrow. Cheers.